Uh, so we're going to be looking at 2 Kings 2 this morning. We're going to try to get through verses 5 through 46, which is a lot, but this is also a passage where I'm not overly interested in lingering in it with what's covered. So hopefully we can get through all of 2 Kings chapter 2 this morning. So in 1 Samuel chapter 8, the prophet Samuel warned Israel what would happen when they anointed a king. And Samuel warned them, if you have a king, he's going to take your sons and put them in his army. He's going to take your daughters and have them be your maids. He's going to tax from your fields, and you're all going to be like your servants, his servants. You will cry out for help because of your king, and the Lord won't answer you because you're just simply reaping what you sowed. And part of the reaping when it came to having a king during the Iron Age at this point in history was very often the violence that was required in order to secure the throne to pass it from one generation to the next. We live in the privilege of our modern and postmodern era where we are accustomed today of swapping out presidents every 4 to 8 years. But at that time period, the passing of the crown from father to son was an opportunity for the powerful, for the bloodthirsty to step into that time of transition, weaken the kingdom, maybe even take the kingdom over for himself. And so in 2 Kings 2, verses 5 through 46, what David does is instruct Solomon on how to have a show of strength that is required to secure his kingdom. So while we may be kind of frustrated to read about these killings here in 2 Samuel 2, part of me is a little frustrated that some of these people that David's like, Solomon, do away with them, that David had not done that work himself. But in spite of our frustrations, I think this show of force was required in that world for Solomon to show that he will rule with the same diligence and show of force as his father. So let's read through David's advice first that he gives to Solomon in 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 5 through 9. Moreover, you know also what Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the army of Israel, to Abner the son of Ner, and to Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. And he shed the blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war on his belt that was around his waist, and on his sandals that were on his feet. Therefore, do according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. For they came to me when I fled from Absalom, your brother. And you see, you have with you Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjaminite from Beruhai, who cursed me with a malicious curse on the day that I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now, therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man and know what you ought to do. But bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. So David here talking about bringing people down to the grave with blood. He begins with Joab. Joab is simply a simple point of justice when it comes to killing Joab, because Joab had previously killed two other men in cold blood. If you were to read back in 1 and 2 Samuel, Abner and Amasa, Joab's killings of them were just vile killings. That I think when you read behind the lines, this is more done with Joab trying to secure his role as the top commander in the army more than anything else. And so Joab deserved capital punishment years ago, but I think David thought that he needed Joab, so he didn't kill Joab for murder when he should have killed Joab with murder. And now he's basically telling Solomon, I'm giving you permission. Joab was one of the top conspirators against your rule, so kill him on account of what he had done before. Now, the next two, commentator John Oswald makes a logical point that the kindness that's shown to Barzillai should be seen in contrast or you could also say in connection to David's call to kill Shimei. What Oswalt points out is that Barzillai is a Gileadite from the tribe of Gad. That means that he's from one of the 10 northern tribes. Shimei, on the other hand, is a Benjaminite. He's from the south. He's from one of the two, ends up being southern tribes that will be united in Judah in the future. And Oswalt points out that maybe one of the reasons to have this blessing and cursing together is David saying to Solomon, Solomon, you need to show everybody in the nation of Israel that if they bless the house of David, they will be blessed. If they curse the house of David, they will be cursed. And it doesn't matter where they live. If you're from the north, you live a godly life, you'll be blessed. Even if you're from the south, even though you're from the south, if you live a life of cursing, you will be cursed. So I think taking side by side this blessing and cursing is David's way of telling Solomon, here's how to teach the people of the land that you will be impartial in your rule, that you're not going to favor the people in the south just because you're from the south, and you're not going to look down from the people in the north even though you're not from the north. So in some ways, these verses together looks like David's just out to settle old scores, like some kind of mob boss who's trying to get more fertilizer for his daisies. But I think David here is instructing Solomon on how to secure his kingship and calling on Solomon when it comes to Joab to do what David failed to do. So then we read now about the death of David in 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 10 through 12. So David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The period that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. Then Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. So David's final passing ends up being very anticlimactic. And I think this is good for David. David, you have a man whose life was filled with stress, filled with conflict, filled with terror. I don't think any of us in here would ever sign up to say, let me have David's life. David's life was so difficult. And I think it's a great blessing that in the final days of David's life, he's able to put his son Solomon on the throne, put the kingdom in capable hands, and then finally pass in peace. And I believe a peaceful passing into glory is one of the greatest blessings that people can experience in this life as children of God. And we should always be grateful to the Lord and praise God if we have a loved one who passes in the Lord and has an opportunity to do so in a peaceful manner, surrounded by family at an old age. That is a gift. It is a gift we should treasure and be thankful for our loved ones, and for if we get to experience that as well. So I think that these verses just show a final blessing that God gives to David after a very traumatic life that David lived from beginning to end. And then we come to the first stage of Solomon's kingdom as Solomon begins to securely grasp the kingdom in his hand. And it starts out by dealing with someone David did not talk about, and that is Solomon's brother Adonijah. So look at verses 13 through 25. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. So she said, do you come peaceably? And he said, peaceably. Moreover, he said, I have something to say to you. And she said, say it. Then he said, you know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. However, the kingdom has been turned over and has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Now I ask just one petition of you. Do not deny me. And she said to him, say it. Then he said, please speak to King Solomon, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife. So Bathsheba said, very well, I will speak for you to the king. Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed down to her and sat down on his throne and had a throne set for the king's mother. So she sat at his right hand. Then she said, I desire one small petition from you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you. So she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah your brother as wife. And King Solomon answered and said to his mother, now why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask him for the kingdom also, for he is my older brother. For him, and for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, may God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now, therefore, as the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has established a house for me as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down, and he died. So for me, this is one of those passages that's just begging for more details, because this is just a little crazy. Solomon, if you had remembered last week, he pardoned Adonijah, but made it clear that Adonijah's future safety rested on him being supportive of Solomon's rule. So all Adonijah had to do was live a peaceful life, not threaten his brother in any way or his authority. And I would guess that the longer Solomon lived, the more secure he became in his position, probably the more freedom that Adonijah would end up having. So then the question is, why, oh why, Adonijah, do you make this stupid move and ask for Abishag, the girl who laid with David, to keep him warm, to be your wife? And every scholar and commentator is just baffled regarding this request by Adonijah, because on the one hand, if this is an innocent request because he was just simply like in love with this girl, it was still an idiotic and stupid request, because any outside observer is going to think that Adonijah is scheming to gain another connection to get another claim upon the throne. And not only would this be seen as Adonijah's scheming, but if Solomon gave her Abishag, it would picture Solomon, as appearing to be weak before everyone else in the kingdom. So I can't imagine that he expected Solomon to go through with this. And so the thing is, like, if Adonijah was in love, he was an idiot in love. If Adonijah was scheming, he was an idiot schemer and couldn't do it very well. So the universal commentary on this is, if you want to have an application for these verses, it is, don't be stupid. Like, don't do things that would make other people appear to be weak. Think before you do things. Don't humiliate people who are in power. So Solomon had wanted to give peace to his older brother, but Adonijah chose the path of foolishness, and his foolishness cost him his life, and also his idiocy helped to secure, though, Solomon's reign in the eyes of others. Now we have the exile of the priest Abiathar in verses 26 and 27. And to Abiathar the priest, the king said, go to Anathoth and to your own fields, for you are deserving of death, but I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord before my father David, and because you were afflicted every time my father was afflicted. So Solomon removed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord, which he spoke concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. So not a lot to say here, which is good because we're covering about 40 verses this morning. But Abiathar the priest was one of those who conspired against Solomon, even though he was faithful to David for so many years throughout David's rule as king. And it appears that he was wise enough to stay put after he was exiled, to live the rest of his life as a farmer or a gardener off in lands outside of Jerusalem. But the one thing that I would want to note is that this exile also further proved a fulfillment of the prophecy that was made as judgment regarding the sons of Eli earlier in 1 Samuel. And this short little passage reminds us of the negative impact that our sin has on our children and our grandchildren and the other people that are in our lives. Very often when one person sins, the sinful person, the sinner, does not experience the worst of the consequences from their own sin. Very often the worst of the consequences from an individual sin are faced by the other people that are surrounding them in their lives. And so you see, even multiple generations after the sons of Eli had sinned, we still have negative consequences of their sin falling upon their descendants. So while no one person is guilty for the sin of another person, man, those consequences of sin, even if the guilt doesn't pass on, those consequences continue to go on generation after generation, as we are still facing the consequences of Adam and Eve's sin. So we need to remember that when we're tempted to fall into sin that could have a negative impact on other people in our lives, fight against that temptation as strong as you can to protect your loved ones and to avoid them from reaping what you have sowed. Now we have the end of Joab in verses 28 through 35. Then news came to Joab, for Joab had defected to Adonijah, though he had not defected to Absalom. So Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord, and he took hold of the horns of the altar. And King Solomon was told, Joab has fled to the tabernacle of the Lord. There he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, Go strike him down. So Benaiah went to the tabernacle of the Lord and said to him, Thus says the king, come out. And he said, No, but I will die here. And Benaiah brought back the word to the king, saying, Thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. Then the king said to him, Well, do as he said, and strike him down and bury him, that you may take him away from me and from the house of my father, the innocent blood which Joab shed. So the Lord will return his blood on his head, because he struck down 2 men more righteous and better than he, and killed them with the sword. Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, the son of Jether, the commander of the army of Judah, though my father David did not know it. Their blood, therefore, shall return on the head of Joab and upon the head of his descendants forever. But upon David and his descendants, upon his house and his throne, there shall be peace forever from the Lord. So Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, went up and struck and killed him, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. The king put Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, in his place over the army, and the king put Zadok the priest in the place of Abiathar. So no one knew the game of self-protection and self-exaltation more than Joab. So when Joab saw the writing on the wall that Adonijah had been dead, that Abiathar the priest had been exiled, he knew who was coming next, and it was going to be Joab. So he ran into the temple. He grabbed the horns of the altar in the tabernacle, not the temple, hadn't been built yet. And so he grabbed the horns of the altar where the sacrifice was made and begged for forgiveness. And remember, Adonijah just found forgiveness doing the same exact thing earlier. But Solomon on this occasion made the decision to follow his father's wishes and not offer peace to Joab. I'm guessing the combination of Joab's earlier murders, then his backing of Adonijah, those in Solomon's eyes just sealed Joab's fate. But I do find it interesting that Solomon struck down Joab while Joab was in the tabernacle, while Joab was holding on to the altar. Joab was not pulled out of the tabernacle, but Solomon says if he wants to die holding on to that altar, there he will die. And this is going to be the first of what will be a built-up theme throughout 1st and 2nd Kings, coming to a major climax at the end of the book. So one of the major themes of 1st and 2nd Kings begins right here in this moment. And that is the theme that God is no respecter of buildings. Our God does not exalt the tabernacle or the temple or any other place as this great holy edifice upon which no destruction or devastation will ever come. The inspired author begins to lay the groundwork here that will pay off when we get to the time period of Jeremiah and the Babylonian invasion, that you cannot find protection by claiming the temple. If they are guilty before God, if they are worshiping false gods, their guilt and condemnation will come to them, even if they're hiding in the holy place. And this is something we need to remember today because people cannot get this lesson through their heads. Like they just cannot. We are incapable of it, it seems like. We are such respecters of buildings. Like sometimes we will act different if we come into the church. We'll think that if we gather together with the people of God in this building, like some reason this is more holy, or maybe God hears our prayers better, or whatever. God does not care about that kind of stuff. The Lord has allowed beautiful building after beautiful building after beautiful building that was constructed in His name to be burned to the ground and to crumble to bits. God does not care about these structures. Like I'm convinced that every hillside, every mountain range in the world is more beautiful than the most beautiful cathedrals that we have built. Like these things don't matter to God, and that's one of the main lessons of the book of Kings. What matters to God when it comes to our actions in relation to God? Not that we build grand buildings, but that we love Him, we love others, we glorify His name, we seek Him, we humble ourselves. That's what matters to God. The Lord would rather us worship Him in humility and love our neighbors as Himself and gather to worship in a shack than gather together in the world's greatest cathedral and temple, but then worship Him with a haughty attitude and show partiality to one another. So this is the beginning, and we're going to see some like little sort of crumb droppings about this as Solomon builds the temple, where God is making sure and plain throughout that these buildings, even if we construct them for God's glory, God will wipe them off the face of the earth if we use them as an excuse for pride and sin in this world. So Joab goes to the altar thinking that it will protect him, and it won't. And now we come to the final execution that was given to solidify Solomon's place in the throne. And this is another just weird one in verses 36 to 46 with the death of Shimei. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not go out from there anywhere. For it shall be on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron, know for certain you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head." And Shimei said to the king, the saying is good. As my lord the king has said, so your servant will do. So Shimei dwelt in Jerusalem many days. Now it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 slaves of Shimei ran away to Achish, the son of Maacath, the king of Gath. And they told Shimei, saying, "Look, your slaves are in Gath." So Shimei arose, saddled his donkey, and went to Achish at Gath to seek for his slaves. And Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. And Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had come back. Then the king called for Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, saying, know for certain on the day you travel anywhere, you shall surely die? And you even said to me, the word I have heard is good. Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you?" The king said moreover to Shimei, "You know, as your heart acknowledges, all the wickedness that you did to my father David. Therefore, the Lord will return your wickedness on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever." So the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. So this is another just really intriguing one. Like Solomon, it appears, knows that he's got to keep his eye on that Shimei because you don't know what he's going to plan. So the interesting thing about Shimei is that he is what we would call a Saulite. And what I mean by a Saulite is initially when David was coming to power, Shimei and his family, they supported the family of Saul. And they wanted the line of Saul to remain as king over Israel and opposed David's place on the throne. So Shimei and his family, they had a long-term motivation to undermine the reign of Solomon. And at the same time, Shimei also had on top of this his sin of insulting and throwing rocks and mud and maybe rotten fruit at David when he was fleeing from Absalom and the city of Jerusalem. So David has really probably held a grudge against Shimei for years. He's wanted this guy dead for a long time because of the way that he cursed David and threw rocks and rotten fruit at him. You see this in the way that David spoke about Shimei and, basically, don't let this guy, have a peaceful death. Kill him. But what's also interesting is that David also said, you see, you have with you Shimei, the son of Gerar. So that's how David described him. You have with you. And John Oswalt points out that this would have been the natural way for David to say that when the kingdom was possibly divided between Adonijah and Solomon, that sort of moment of intrigue, that Shimei would have been with Solomon instead of with Adonijah, that he would have aligned with him on that. So it's hard to say what Shimei was thinking. He's a Saulite. He's disapproving of the line of David. But that also doesn't mean if there's two sons of David who are vying for the throne, that he's going to pick one son and not the other son. Maybe he thought the younger son's going to kind of be an awful kid probably, because we know younger sons are the worst. I speak from experience as a younger son. We're just awful. Maybe he supported him, hoping that would make the kingdom less stable and he could bring the house of Saul in. We don't know. There's probably a lot going on behind the scenes behind that. So Solomon himself even appears to really not know what to do with this guy. I mean, could you imagine how torn Solomon was if he's like, this guy supported me, but at the same time he cursed out my father. This guy supported me, but at the same time I know he really wants the house of Saul on the throne. So what do I do with him? And so he thought, here's what I do with him. I'll just keep a close eye on him. I'll tell him he's got to build a house in Jerusalem. He's got to live right around me. And if at any time he leaves the confines of Jerusalem, I'm going to assume that he is up to no good. So if he leaves Jerusalem, he's going to die. But Shimei, after having lived in Jerusalem for about 3 years, I'm going to assume after 3 years, he gets lulled into a sense of security. He just thinks, waters under the bridge, we're all fine. I don't need to worry about anything anymore. So when his slaves run away, he goes after it. But as soon as word gets out to Solomon of Shimei's foolish act of leaving the walls of Jerusalem, Solomon acts decisively. He's like, Benaiah, the very commander of the whole guard. He's like, Benaiah, go after Shimei and take him out. And so Shimei is end up also being killed early on in Solomon's reign. And I think this is also setting us up for the future of what will be Solomon's early reign in Judah, in order to show a contrast here. Because why did Adonijah die and why did Shimei die? Because they were idiots. That's why they both died. They were fools. To both of them, Solomon said, if you live peaceably, if you live right around me and support my rule, you'll be fine. I'll treat you well. We'll get along well. But they acted like a couple of foolish idiots. And what happened? They died. What was Solomon's rule characterized right after this? Wisdom. And so I think we're meant to see a contrast here between the cursing and the judgment that comes upon people for living with foolishness and the blessing and righteousness that we see when people walk in wisdom. So you could almost say that the first 3 chapters, once we include the chapter of Solomon praying to God and getting the wisdom, these almost serve as a narrative prelude to the book of Proverbs. If you want to know why the wisdom of Proverbs is so important, you read the first 3 chapters of Kings, and you see what happens when you're a foolish idiot, and you see what happens when you ask God for wisdom and you walk in his wisdom. So I think that's also part of what's going on here, not only to show how Solomon secured his throne, established his rule, but I also think that the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the wisdom of the editor, is trying to teach us the importance of walking in wisdom and keeping foolish behavior out of our lives. So